Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Multi-Region Purchasing Co-op Spotlight Series, Evaluating and Awarding a Bid. I am Carrie Warnick, the Program Coordinator for Multi-Region Purchasing Cooperative. And in usual fashion, my trainings are for any district across the state, but obviously MRPC members are first and foremost, but everyone is always welcome. Now, we are going to be talking about evaluating and awarding a bid today. This is considered the third phase of a procurement process. And during the next hour, we will be talking about how do you create an evaluation matrix, what criteria is allowed or maybe not allowed, what are bonus points for local, different ways to evaluate pricing, and awarding a vendor. Now, what is an evaluation matrix or rubric? Well, technically, it is a list of criteria that serves as your scoring system or a tool by which you will determine a bid winner. It is required per federal and state guidelines for all formal procurement methods. So that would include an IFB, such as an invitation for bid, or an RFP, a request for proposal. I'm opening up my chat screen, so don't forget. All right. Now, an effective evaluation matrix will be specific to the type of solicitation. So that means you might create different matrices, is that even a word, for a product bid versus a bid you go out for straight service. There may be some different criteria you would include. Also, if you're going out for local produce or local agricultural products, you may include some bonus points on that matrix, which may not be included in some other bid that you do. Obviously, it's going to create a fair and open competition through appropriate scoring. So this allows an even playing field for all the bidders. And we're going to look at some criteria that will show you how you can create that even playing field between the large companies and small companies. Obviously, you want to allow the ability for the smaller guys to win a bid over larger companies by including things like a point or two for historically underutilized businesses, small minority women-owned businesses, or even veteran-owned companies. And it's going to allow you to determine a winner with sound reason documented through scoring. So obviously, building an evaluation matrix is important, and you want it to be set up in an organized fashion. Now, in your solicitation, you want to include very clear language about your evaluation method and language if you plan to award one vendor or multiple vendors. Some of you may have solicitations where you are planning to award a primary vendor and also a backup vendor. And if that is the case, you're going to want to include language about that so that anyone bidding is very clear on what amount of business can they win, what does it mean to be a backup vendor, what does that look like if they are awarded as a backup vendor. And then, of course, each criteria in your matrix must be listed and described. So each bidder understands exactly how you plan to score as you review everything submitted, pricing, and any tangibles or intangibles that would determine a bid winner. So clearly defining all these things in your solicitation, it's so important. And it sets you up so that when you start to do your evaluation, leaves little room for protest, because if you have provided all the clear language in that solicitation about your evaluation, how you're going to go about it, you may even include those that would be on the evaluation committee. As a district, you probably have a group of individuals in your food service department that are part of that committee. As long as you have determined there's no conflict of interest and they can be involved in the evaluation process, and that is also important when you're considering who would be involved with an evaluation. So you might have the ability within the solicitation to list the individuals or at least the position titles that would be evaluating the bid. And some might have different roles as well. You know, in multi-region co-op, our administrative assistant, it kind of oversees receipt of all the bid response documents and goes through, and we're kind of a team when we do it, but it's a pass or fail situation. We're going to look at some of this in a minute. Where did they submit all documents requested or did they not? And then we get into the scoring, and that becomes a voluntary committee with members. Now, at a school district, you're not going to have a voluntary committee, but you're definitely going to have specific individuals. All right. Now, when you're creating your evaluation matrix, and as I mentioned, this could be different for different types of bids. The one main consistent situation is that pricing must be the heaviest weighted factor. Now, don't get confused that pricing has to hold the most amount of points between an aggregate total of the other criteria. It just simply means that your pricing score needs to contain the highest number of points compared to any other individual criteria. Now, when you are evaluating pricing, you're going to use what I call a tangible or a non-subjective approach. It is literally a mathematical equation you're going to use, and we're going to break it down here in a little while. You also get to determine, because there is no guidance or rule that says you've got to have an evaluation that's 100 points or you've got to have an evaluation that's 50. You get to decide how you want to lay that out. Some of your matrices could have 8 or 10 criteria listed, depending on the bid. Some of your bids and evaluation matrix may only have 4 or 5 criteria. You get to drive that boat. You also get to determine what's the total number of points that a vendor could get to win the bid. Sometimes it might be 50. It might be 100. It's however you want to lay it out. I always like using criteria that allows me to literally have a tangible reason how the vendor got the number of points that they did. And I'm going to show you some examples here in a little bit. But when I talk about tangibles, you've got pricing. You're going to be looking at pricing. You're going to run a total, however you set that up. And then you're going to apply a mathematical calculation. There's no arguing against the equation, right? In my references form, that's actually each question, there are 4, can receive up to 5 points. We try to get 3 references. That could be a total of 20 points per reference for a total of 60. Then that gets divided. So again, I'm using a mathematical calculation as to how that vendor receives a certain number of points. Anything that you can come up with in your criteria and the way you approach getting to that number of points per vendor that's based on fact or an equation or a system leaves no room for arguing or protesting against how you scored any vendor. Now, obviously, you're going to have some what I call subjective criteria in that matrix. These are criteria that are based on personal experience. They're experiential. It's sampling of products. And that's really all about your own taste buds, honestly, your own eyesight. So when you're looking at criteria that really is kind of subjective, 1 or 2 of those is good. And you want to have, you know, if you're doing products, if you're unfamiliar with a product, you've never sampled it, you don't know what it tastes like, maybe you've never seen it in a cooked form, you've only seen pictures, but a vendor submitted this as an offered up product. You might need to bring that in for sampling and possibly do a side-by-side taste test. You might, if it's several products you need to look at, you might need to do a blind taste test to really determine which one is the higher quality product. I recommend blind sampling because it leaves no room for prejudgment or favoritism. If the testers or reviewers don't know, is that a Swans or is it an Ardones? Is it a Tyson or a Pilgrims? They can't decide before they even sample the product. Now, if we are talking about a services contract you're trying to award, it might require a presentation, and that is certainly acceptable. You might require all eligible vendors to come in and do a short presentation as part of the bidding process. We're going to talk about different types of evaluations that might be one aspect of an evaluation that you do. So creating a matrix that has as many tangible mathematical process, whatever that looks like, is good. A couple of subjective criteria. Now, if for some reason you cannot sample a product or you're unfamiliar with the vendor's products, you cannot subtract points because, of course, that would not be fair, right? How can you deem someone points if you have no idea what their products are about? And that does happen sometimes. Sometimes if there's a new vendor that responds to a bid, and if you can't sample the products, you're going to have to give full points. That is basically the rule. So leave yourself enough time to evaluate appropriately, and allows you to bring in some new products to sample so that you don't get caught in that situation. It's kind of like if you don't know the vendor, you have to give full points, but you're not really sure about their products. That may not be the best outcome if they get awarded and you discover the product's actually inferior compared to the products that maybe you would have gone with if that new vendor hadn't gotten full points. I'm not trying to say don't give new vendors a chance. That is not what I'm trying to say. I'm just pointing out that give yourself time to evaluate, assess how many products are on your bid that you might have to do a blind taste test. How much time will it take to get those samples in? Another thing you want to outline in your solicitation, that part of your evaluation may require samples being mailed to your school or to your campus or warehouse. And then how long will that take to obviously cook or heat, thaw and serve the samples, and really figure out which is the better quality product. So lots of moving parts, right? All right, moving on. Now, examples of evaluation criteria. And this is basically kind of a mix of what Multi-Region Co-op has in our evaluation matrix. And I do have a sample evaluation matrix in the procurement tools Google folder. It's in there for you to take a look at, reference. Obviously, pricing as that primary consideration. Now, if you're doing an invitation for bid, technically pricing is the final determining factor unless there's a tie, or if an alternate product has been offered and you need to look at that product, sample it or research it if it's equipment. So if we're talking about an IFB, your matrix may look very different compared to an RFP, where it's a request for proposal, and you've got all these different criteria that's really going to be looked at and evaluated before you determine a bid winner. So kind of keep that in mind. That depends on the type of solicitation, the formal procurement method you're utilizing as to what drives everything in that evaluation. Pricing, number one, your heaviest weighted factor, your primary consideration. Then you've got responsible and responsive vendor. Now, you've got required documents every bidder must submit to become eligible for evaluation and potential award. The way Multi-Region Co-op does it is depending on how many documents are requested. let's say if it's 15 documents they're required to submit to be a successful bidder. For each document that is either missing, they fail to submit it, or that we have to turn around and reach back out to the vendor because they failed to sign it, or they turned in an incomplete document, or maybe they submitted the wrong document, that is 1 point off. So that particular criteria for this co-op carries the weight of 15 points. But for each missing or incorrect document, they get docked 1 point. Who can argue with that, right? 1 point per document. If you didn't turn it in, you're going to get dinged. Reputation, or, basically based on reference feedback. So we have a form. Vendors are required to submit 3 references, preferably schools that they've done business with currently or in the past. And then we will send out a form. And I do recommend that when you're sending out forms that a person that's going to hopefully respond on this reference, that you make it easy for them. If you don't make it easy and you ask for a lot of different feedback or lengthy answers, you may not get the best return on reference checks. We have a form that has 4 simple questions, and it's built so that they are giving a rating of 1 to 5. There's a comment section that is optional. They want to add an extra comment. Maybe they scored low and they want to tell us why, but they don't have to. We are looking for honest feedback and a scoring tool. And so we try to be successful in getting all 3. The way this one does work out is the vendors don't get dinged if we can't get all 3 references back. And here's why. In today's time with HR, sometimes employees are not allowed to respond to a request for a reference. That is not the vendor's fault. So you can't really punish the vendor if the company has a policy that their employees can't give reference feedback. So what happens is our end goal is at least 1 reference, whether it's good or bad. We shoot for 3 and we hope for a minimum of 1. Now, we will reach back out to the vendor. If we can't get the first 3, we'll reach back out to the vendor and say, hey, can you please send us 3 other references that you've double checked are good references. That vendor needs to check with the people he or she is putting on their reference sheet to find out, can they respond? Number 1, is it allowed in their district or their company? And are they willing to respond? You'd be surprised how many times a reference comes back and it's not very good. So clearly, some kind of communication didn't occur between the vendor and the person that they were working for, because they thought that was going to be a good reference, and well, it wasn't such a good reference. Okay, I always get kind of humored when that happens. I don't know why. So again, it's a scoring tool, and it's all kind of based on, you get X number of points per reference feedback, and there's a total number of points all divided by the number of returned references. So it's very fair. Now, after 2 chances for a vendor to provide us with references, if we still can't get a single reference, yes, that does hurt their score, because we really just want 1. If you can't just give us 1, that's a red flag to us. All right, obviously you can give a point or 2 for your hub and small women, minority. I'm missing an M in that slide. I have to get that corrected. Obviously, you want to have a criteria about the quality of goods or services. That is your subjective. That is a non-tangible. With your hub, minority, small women-owned businesses, that's a tangible. They must submit certificates proving they qualify for such status. Local could be bonus points. And a vendor is either going to qualify for local or not qualify, because in your solicitation, you have defined what is local. What qualifies a vendor to be local? Is it a 50-mile radius from your main campus or your warehouse? Is it county lines? Is it the state of Texas? Your bonus points may be anywhere from 1 to 3 or 5 extra points to a vendor, kind of based on how many total points are in your criteria matrix or your evaluation matrix. You can have a criteria called other factors, but outline those other factors. Is it an online ordering system? Do they have easily accessible reports you can download off their website? What were their delivery fees? High, low, fuel surcharges? Do they have those? Do they have a really high minimum ordering requirement, or a low requirement, or no requirement at all? So you can include all these other factors, but be clear in what are the other factors so there are no questions asked, and it doesn't become murky in your answers between different vendors. So you want that clarity, and it allows for that transparency that every vendor sees what will they be scored on, and they know exactly, well, 5 points for other factors, 1 point is online ordering. We don't have that. I, as a bidder, automatically know I'm not going to get the full 5 points because I don't offer online ordering. So be very clear in your criteria. And then the last one I have on the screen is past performance. I know that TEA has a evaluation matrix that has been shared in the state for years. Many years ago, we were using it in this co-op and my previous co-op, and on there it has past performance. But several years ago, TDA shared they don't like this one because some were giving less points to vendors if they had no past experience with them. Again, this kind of falls back on, if you don't know the product, you can't really ding them points because that's not fair. How can you give less than full points to a new vendor that you have had no experience with? So that's not a very fair scoring situation. Now, what is allowable, if you're going to use this one in your matrix, and I just say don't, but that's me, personal opinion there. If you're going to use this one in your evaluation, make sure that you've got documentation in the previous school years tracking vendor performance with those vendors you've previously had awarded. So if they bid the new bid and past performance is on there, how are you going to evaluate a score based on proof of a poor past performance, or proof that they, an end of the school year survey, or maybe you do a biannual survey of how are the vendors performing with all your ordering managers, whatever that looks like. If you've been doing that due diligence and you can honestly score a vendor that's been doing business with you in the past lower than full points and have the documentation to back it up, well, why did I get 7 points versus 10 points? Well, we've got this tracking record that you failed to adhere to the contractual terms, you didn't deliver what was needed. You get the picture. Have the documentation to back up a lower score. Also, be aware that if it's a vendor that you have no history with, they must receive full points. So that criteria is a little more work, and MRPC just removed it several years ago because, we've got 7 or 8 other great criteria that really create a fair evaluation system, and we just felt it wasn't needed. And at the time, TDA didn't want to see it. So just be careful with that one. All right. Now, examples of evaluation criteria can be found in TDA's ARM, section 17, under procurement. This was taken right out of the ARM this morning, most current version. Price cost, primary consideration, responsiveness to specific specifications and technical requirements. That's that responsible and responsive vendor that I've got on our criteria. They've separated it to be a demonstration of responsibility, meaning they submitted experience or reference letters, financial condition and stability, business practices. So obviously, if you're going to use this set of criteria, I would definitely list out, how are you going to score that? Do they need to send in a reference letter? If you're looking at their financial stability, what documents are accepted that you will say, yep, you get points for that? Be clear. Accounting and reporting systems. And again, reporting systems. What type of reporting systems? This might be more specific to velocity reports or commodity tracking if we're talking about USDA processed commodities. And then, of course, delivery schedules. Are they able to meet your delivery schedules? I don't think anyone really knows that until they start delivering, and then they're not meeting your delivery schedule as you outlined in your solicitation. But yet this is an example provided to you by TDA. So if you're struggling to come up with a matrix, there's one right there in the arm for you. All right, let's talk about evaluating pricing, because that is the heaviest weighted factor. That is probably the most involved evaluation out of all the criteria that you're going to do on your bid. There are several ways to evaluate pricing, and it also can depend on the type of bid. Now, we're still talking formal procurement method, but there are different types of bids. You may be putting out a list of products and you know you're going to award multiple vendors because you're going to line item award, meaning each product that is offered that matches whichever vendor offers the lowest price is going to win that product. Again, you want to be clear in your solicitation. This is how you are evaluating and awarding. You might be doing a market basket evaluation. So market basket evaluations are great for products like food products, but they're not appropriate for equipment or service contracts. That is right out of the arm. But if you are familiar with market basket and you dig in, this is a really great approach if you've got a very large bid with so many products, that you're going to take this approach where you're going to grab either the highest volume, typically 75% of the total contract value and volume of products, and evaluate that sample of products. There are a couple different ways to approach a market basket evaluation. One is like a total price cost analysis based on an aggregate total, or a simplified cost analysis that's based on that representative sample of products, that 75% of the highest volume and largest piece of your contract value. So there are a couple of ways you can approach evaluating even within a market basket approach. Then there's qualitative. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, this is more appropriate if you've gone out for a services contract or maybe a consultant contract, where maybe explaining specific outcomes or expectations of the elements is a little tricky. And so it might require that you have the bidder come in and give a presentation, or somehow outline their ability to prove they can do the job. And what would that entail? So it could look something like explanation or demonstration of their relative experience. What is their level of expertise in regard to the job? They understand what is required, and they can explain to you how they would tackle the job or whatever the tasks are at hand and do it well. So that's more of a qualitative evaluation. All right. Now, before I get into this, I do want to share some examples, and I did add these to the procurement tools folder. And this is a sample of pricing evaluation. Now, I'm going to give you 3 samples because, as I mentioned, there are different ways to approach this. I don't have an example of qualitative, but I do have an example of looking at all the items as an aggregate, an example of line item evaluation, and then, of course, an example of a representative sample, that's 75% of the contract value. These are your highest volume movers. So what you see on the screen right now are all items. And what I will tell you is that when I do my pricing evaluation, I've got this spreadsheet, and it starts off with pulling in every single item each vendor bid as a tab. So we've got a vendor A and a vendor B. Now this happens to be milk products. It was one of the easier ones, sort of. I didn't want to pull anything just completely massive and freak you out. because co-op is a different beast than a school district sometimes, unless you're a really large school district, and then you may look similar to a co-op. So what I did first was I went through and I kind of redlined products that the vendor did not bid between each vendor. Then I did a comparison and pulled out everything that didn't match up. Now, in this example, I've pulled in these right here are what MRPC provided to the vendors when they got ready to enter their bid response on products. Okay, it's our numerical order number, our bid code, what was our product specification, and our total estimated quantities for each of those product specs. Then the vendors responded. I've got vendor A and I've got vendor B. Now, anything where any one of these items, if there was a no bid by one of the vendors, obviously we can't compare pricing because I don't have pricing for one. So those got deleted. My next task is to go through and make sure that what is being offered, such as the pack size, is the same. Now, sometimes what's going on here? And I've got a conditional situation that's not, okay. Sometimes pack size may differ between two vendors. So you've got to level that out to fairly compare pricing. Now, luckily, the milk bid pricing that we capture is based on a unit of milk, not a case pack. So that makes it very easy to break down a pricing evaluation. If you've got just maybe a full line grocery bid where two vendors may offer up products, different brands that might have a different pack size, you might need to break that down into number of servings per case so that you can start to look at serving cost versus case cost. Because you want to make sure you are properly evaluating apples to apples. And if you cannot do an apple to apple evaluation, then maybe that product gets stricken from the evaluation for pricing. And that can happen. It can happen sometimes. So this particular sample, I went through and verified everything is matching up, number one, even though it really doesn't matter because I've got a unit price that I've collected. And I do two different sets of pricing. I will run a total based on single unit cost. And then I will run a total based on extended cost. Extended cost is, well, they're going to charge you $2.75 for this particular 1 pound of cottage cheese, and you said you're going to buy one, right? With this particular cottage cheese, it's a 5 pound. Estimated quantities are 402 5-pound containers. So that's going to run you a little more. So I will run an extended cost as well as what's our single cost. And the reason I like to do this is it exposes something about each vendor. Now, what you can see is that up here at the top, I've just basically dropped in a sum function that adds up that entire column. If I were to buy 1 unit of each of these items, what is it going to cost me, right? On both sides here, vendor A and vendor B. So right away, I can see that overall, if I were to buy 1 single item, it's going to cost me a little more with vendor A compared to vendor B. But when I run the sum function for all of this extended cost, because that's my true cost. If I purchase everything I estimated in my solicitation, this is my actual cost. It looks very, very different. Vendor A actually comes in as a lower cost compared to vendor B. So what does this tell me? This tells me that some of the products for vendor A that have a higher estimated quantity were priced lower, whereas vendor B actually had a higher price on my higher volume products. So you get to see a real picture because pricing is a game, and vendors are companies that are for profit. They are trying to maximize their profit. And so, I feel like it's a chessboard. Don't even know how to play chess. So, don't ask me to do that. But in this situation, vendor A would be the better choice and, in my opinion, the winner, because we are really considering extended cost. No one's going to buy one little unit of each thing. We are planning to buy all of those products we estimated in our solicitation. So I would award based on this. Now, what you see up here are the criteria scores. I always like to run a criteria score on a single unit just to see how it comes out. And the point difference, this is where pricing is not subjective. If you've got a total of 50 points that the pricing evaluation will receive, you just can't randomly say, oh, best price 50, second best price, I'm gonna give them 45. That is not going to, just not a good approach. And you can't really validate, how did you get 45 points? So it's a mathematical equation. Now, up here, I have given you the mathematical equation. You take the low bid, you divide it by itself times the total number of points a vendor can get for that pricing criteria. In this scenario, it's 50. So when I run that equation, 49,000 divided by the 49,000 is 1 times 50 is going to give me 50. Now over here, you see it's a 49.67 criteria score because I take the low bid divided by the second low bid times our 50 points. And now that becomes the criteria score for vendor B when we start to lay out all of our scores and determine a final who got the most points winner. All right, this is an aggregate all items. You could potentially apples to apples. Now, if you wanted to dive into the weeds and your solicitation is all about line item awards, I've lined up all my items. I have confirmed that unit of measure and pack size is the same. I'm going to look at my extended cost. I'm also going to look at my unit price, and I'm going to flag those that are the winner. So in this situation, these top 4 items, vendor B offers the best price compared to vendor A. But now I've got vendor A with these 5 products. So line item award, absolutely an option. Make sure you're clear how it's going to work in your solicitation. Now, you may discover you've got a product where the vendor offered the same unit cost or case price. Everything matches up. It's all the same pack size. Everything matches up. Unit price is 42 cents. But for some reason, the extended cost is a little more. This is why it's important if you're going to do a unit price to, let me get this out here, to drop it out 4 decimal spaces. And the reason you want to do this, I didn't talk about that a while ago on unit price. The reason you want to do this is because when we talk about unit price, little nth of a cent can make a big difference. In this scenario, it's making several $1,000s difference because of the quantities. This is one of the higher moving products, 1,300,000 case or units, and that's going to make quite a bit of difference. That could be $2,000 or $3,000 or even more. In this case, it looks like it's around $7,000 to $8,000. That's a good chunk of change. So watch what you're or how you're evaluating. Always really go by your extended cost in most cases because that's what you plan to purchase. And then, of course, I'm giving you an example of that market basket approach to a representative sample of your products. And what I did is I basically took all my items that were apples to apples. I then sorted it largest to smallest quantities, and I grabbed the top 75%. That's my approach to that representative sampling. And then I did my comparisons. Same approach. I'm looking for total cost based on single unit just for kicks. My true determining score is really on that extended cost. So you can see when we take that representative sample of our highest volume movers or 75% of the contract value, you've got vendor A coming out ahead on both fronts. So this tells you this vendor is actually charging a little more on the higher volume movers. So you really do start to see how do different vendors price their products. Okay, so that is on our pricing evaluation. Now, I do have a sample of putting all of your scores together. And again, clarity and transparency is absolutely key. You don't want someone coming back to you and protesting, and then you're scrambling to prove, how did that vendor win? How did you come to those number of points? What does this look like? So multi-region co-op uses a software that allows our member committee to go in and score and make comments. At a district level, you may not be utilizing a software that does, allows something that easy. And maybe you're using a spreadsheet, or maybe you're using Word documents or Adobe fillable forms, whatever that looks like to you. My recommendation is get organized around it before you even release your solicitation, so that when you open that bid, you can hit that ground running with your evaluation, and you're not trying to create a wheel for evaluating when you've given yourself maybe 2 or 3 weeks to announce a winner. So get organized around how you're going to go about collecting scores. What does that look like? How are you putting it together and aggregating the total points on each vendor that bids, so that you can very easily announce or determine and announce a winner or winners if you're doing multiple vendors. So I've got tabs here. This would be really easy to set up in an Excel spreadsheet for vendor A and vendor B. And the way we set it up is we've got the different criteria that our reviewers might be reviewing. And as I mentioned earlier, you may be assigning certain aspects of the evaluation matrix to different staff people. And so this is really easy. This was a criteria: quality of vendor's goods and the reviewer's score. Names have been removed to protect the innocent. So this was pulled out of our software, but you could set it up to where, each reviewer would enter their score. Maybe they give a reason why they scored. Our software kind of drives this, and then a comment if they want to make a comment. And each criteria is listed and each score is collected. These scores get transferred up into this top area, so we can start to get a total. Out of all of our reviewers, we're going to look at the average points for each criteria for each vendor. Once we gather all the criteria scored on each vendor, I'm going to drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, another tab, where vendor A, it's very clear. Were they responsible and responsive according to our evaluation committee? Total points they could receive, how many did they get on average? An average number of points. Reputation of vendor. This comes from our reference feedback. There's that 4 points. Qualifies as hub, small minority women, veteran owned. So 1 point, either they qualify or they don't. Certifications. Subjective, quality of the vendor's goods, 10 points. Truly subjective, that is a number given by the reviewer. Where do they think the quality falls on a 1 to 10 scale? Is it 9? Is it 5? Is it really poor? Is it 1 or 2? What are the bases? I would probably include some language about quality, meaning its appearance, its texture, its taste, various things. You might even, at a district level, include how well does it hold up on the line? Was it easy to prepare? I mean, there's all kinds of things you could include in the quality of the vendor's goods, especially if it's food products. Again, you drive that boat. Extent to which it meets your needs. Did they offer a good variety of products? Forgot to include that in my list of criteria. Was it a small number of products? Were the products meeting the specifications written? Sodium levels, calories, all that good fun stuff. You can include a small overview of what are you looking at as to, does the product meet your needs? Other relevant factors holds 5 points. I've got 5 things they got to check: online ordering, online reporting, etc., etc. And then the pricing score, obviously we're going to pull that, from the sheet. And then we have a totaling column right here. And we get a clear winner determined by the total points. Not a whole lot of arguing going on there. If you lay it out clearly and in very direct, specific terms in your matrix. Documentation is king. That's all I can say. All right. Any questions on any of that? I know it's a lot, and I will tell you that it can become very involved, but getting organized around it and setting up your system before you even release that bid is going to be your saving grace. All right. Let's get back to our slide. We've got about 13 more minutes, I think, and I'll finish this up. And then if you guys have any questions. So when you are ready to award a vendor, you need to send a notification letter. And these will be asked in your AR for by your auditor, proof of a notification letter. And that means award and also no award letters. It's a courtesy. It's a professional courtesy to let all bidders know, did they win? Did they not win? Are they primary? Are they backup? What does that look like? Even if a vendor didn't qualify for eligibility of evaluation, let them know and let them know why, to help them with future bidding. Maybe they didn't follow all the requirements and instructions, so they weren't even considered responsible or responsive. If no one ever tells them, they may make the same mistakes on future bids. So I think that's just a courtesy. And then you want to not only send over a notification letter, but if it's an award letter, then you want to include a single page or a double page contract, meaning a copy of the terms and conditions attached, and then some type of a form that says you've been awarded for this amount, this period, this initial term of the contract. What does that look like? And have the vendor sign that they accept the award and that they have received a copy of the terms and conditions, and then you move forward. And I think I've got a sample. Yeah, hang on. I've got a sample of what that might look like. Let's see here. Where is it? Oh, good grief. Okay. So this is a sample of just a basic award letter. It is one page. And then of course I include the terms and conditions for this bid award. It's just saying, hey, we're pleased to inform you that you are approved by our board or executive director, that we are moving forward with awarding you as a vendor. I do let them know that there is an attached contract, an award acceptance form they must sign. They get a copy of the terms and conditions, and just looking forward to a great year, whatever. Short, sweet, professional, and then your attachments. And then you want to get back that signed contract. TDA will ask you, where is your contract with this vendor? And it doesn't have to be anything large or extensive. Even on renewals, I also send renewal approved letters. It's a notification letter. They went to all this work to submit renewal pricing. Maybe you had to, receive updated W-9. Maybe there were some other forms they needed to submit just for the renewal, new agreement, whatever that looks like. And you want to let them know, awesome, we're approving your renewal. We've reviewed everything, and boom, here it is. Again, send them a copy of the terms and conditions, the original terms and conditions, so they are reminded of what those look like while being in business with you. Very simple. And then of course, a no award letter. I don't think I had one open, but you want to let those vendors know. Unfortunately, you were not awarded, and you might want to share why. I actually think I do have one that I can share, maybe. But anyway, so you want to be professional, you want to be courteous, and you want to let them know. Now I do have a question, and I've got a question about it. Am I going to talk about shipping, freight, and surcharges? And and do I have a no award letter in my folder? Yes, I've got a couple of templates that I worked from for award letters, renewal approval letters, and no award letters. So I will add those over to the procurement tools folder. Now, as far as shipping, freight, and surcharges, welcome to the new world, right? Post-COVID or during COVID. It's ugly. We have a form, that can be another factor. You could include that in your pricing evaluation as well. If you wanted to include that in pricing evaluation, you might, describe that in your solicitation, definitely, how you're going to assess if there are any shipping, fuel fees, freight, or surcharges. We're seeing more and more that, some companies are doing that now. Mainly with those companies that, not so much with our full line grocery distributors, we're not seeing that happen with those like Labatt or Cisco. I can't speak to Gordon's or US Foods or any of the other distributors, but I'm not seeing it happen in that arena. Equipment is a biggie. Equipment delivery fees are or can be pretty hefty. We simply have a form in our solicitation that vendors are required to fill out where they tell us, what is your delivery fee if you've got to use a lift gate or delivery without a lift gate, delivery without a lift gate but installation, delivery with a lift gate and installation. So we try to make it very clear for them to answer. Yes, it's $200, it's $350, it's $150, whatever that is. That form also talks about minimum deliveries. So we do have a lot of vendors that have a minimum requirement, whether it's you need to spend at least $150 like DOD. Similar, we've got a distributor that does have a minimum on that. Maybe they require a minimum number of cases. I see that more common on ice cream bids, where they require at least 10 cases of product. Each vendor is going to be different. So the easier you can make it for them to answer to the questions that you have in a form, the better off you are. And you can draw this into your evaluation matrix. If pricing, obviously your pricing is going to be affected by fuel surcharges, by shipping and freight. Add that into part of the big picture. So maybe your spreadsheet looks like you've got extended cost, and then somehow you add in any kind of a shipping or some type of a fee that creates an end number that allows you to better evaluate, or you create a separate criteria about those things. That would be easy to do as well. Probably easier than added it into pricing. I would just do a separate criteria where it's about shipping, freight, and delivery fees or fuel surcharges. And that way it could come with, an evaluation of their fees. Lay it out like you do the pricing. You've got vendor A, vendor B, shipping fees, freight, delivery, installation. Do a score based on that. Model it after the pricing evaluation score. That would be pretty easy. And I appreciate that question because that is a great question. And that is another way to score that's tangible and not subjective. So thank you, Karen, for that question. I love this for that. It's awesome. Any other questions? I'm looking through. I don't see anything else that got about five minutes. So yeah, I'll get a few things over in that procurement tools folder. Maybe I'll mock up and on that evaluation matrix. See, what is it called? What did I title that? I've got pricing evaluation sample. So what I'll do, I will mock up a shipping, freight, delivery fee kind of tab so that you can be reminded, oh yeah, this is something we can include in our criteria. Because as I mentioned, you build your own set of criteria. What TDA has in the ARM is just a sample, an idea of what you could do, but you do get to create that. So jump in, right? All right, any questions besides the one? You guys are always so make it easy on me. Well, I hope you're getting some good stuff out of these sessions and maybe some new ideas. You're giving me new ideas, so this is great. I love that back and forth. It's a conversation, in my opinion, always between co-op and district. And you know, I'm going to say it takes a village. I hope people hate hearing that, but it's so true. Maybe we need to come up with a different word besides village. Takes a team, you know. Anyway, all right. Well, I'm not seeing anything come through on the chat. So again, thank you guys for attending my training sessions. It's always my pleasure to hopefully expose you to things that might help you at your district level, or help you learn how we function as a co-op and go forward. So it's not easy. We know this. Lots of fun to be had. But anyway, again, thanks everyone. Have a great rest of the week. There is one more training coming up on Thursday afternoon, and that is all about contract management. So one more hour and we'll be through the month of September. So again, thanks for being here. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'll just play you some music for a few more minutes. Enjoy.